Hello, everyone. The title of tonight's episode is actually two titles came to my mind, and I decided to share them in one talk. About how language is a bridge between sights and a bridge between sight. And in some sense, I want to speak about the eyes of existence. I want to, in some sense, dive into the significance of our visual sensory perception. Oh my God. I apologize for the interruption. The eyes of existence is the eyes of existence are, it can be said to be the collective value of self-awareness. And self-awareness is such a powerful intersection point of your inner and outer realm that what we think is inside outside is an oscillation between a subjective and objective dimension. I speak about this often in these talks, that we in our evolution had something very unique occur. This is something I consider. That once the animal, this creature on this planet, whatever it was, somehow was able to make itself separate, to see itself as something and to see the world as something else, suddenly from a sort of neutral, nothing kind of like just nature, the movement of nature came to a point where it became aware of itself, and by that nature of becoming aware of itself, in some sense, entered a subjective dimension of existence, where the idea of self, it was in some sense found in awareness. This means that from a sort of conceptual non-existence, concepts arose, and these concepts became as deep as reflections as the ability of the creature to segment itself subjectively. In other words, if I tell you right now, think of how many ways you're different from all the different kinds of people on this planet, you're going to see just you being able to acknowledge your difference, you'll automatically build creativity by recognizing how your intelligence separates you. And it has to, in some sense, because we're creatures of the voice. Our eyes serve our throats, and our throats, in some sense, originate the subjective reality and transfer it. And the value of language, for me, language is a kind of love and hate relationship. There are moments where I see how deeply it has blinded man, and it has been the igniter of war. But there are moments where I see language as the greatest invention and the greatest technology this species has to, in some sense, administer its intelligence. And the decision is pretty much made by our world. This world is, it doesn't, like, if the world doesn't have any beliefs, if Gaia, if the spirit of the planet had a personality, that personality would not care, because it is changing all the time, as if you go through a rough day and tomorrow you wake up and you in some sense don't even remember the roughness, but you went through it and you lived the life in a moment. So the value of language, at least in this talk, I have a very I'm looking at it as the greatest invention of human beings, and in some sense a bridge between inner realities. So what I'm trying to get to with that evolution pointer is that in our evolution, when we became self-aware, we in some sense found ourselves in a duplicate of the world, in a linguistic simulation, where you're in your mind. If I ask you where its edge is, you're going to see it's going to be a thought. The edge of your mind is thought. Unfortunately, for an individual sort of egotism, egoic construct, an individual can only walk so far, but it is the collective that makes the walk worth it. As if, like, would you rather walk alone, you know, let's say on a mountain, or would you rather, in some sense, walk with, you know, members of, you know, the greatest species that has ever lived? So what I'm trying to say is that we innately, because our society and the current mainstream, it has idolized the individual, and it's as if, like, our cultures are in the hands of people who their attention is on just the importance of individualism. And so we find this individualism in a hierarchical structure, and based on the behavior of people at these different stations, these different titles of ability, as if, like, society needs to be chained, so it has chains to break. You need a bit of chaos to experience the order. If there was nothing bad, the concept of good would never exist. And so you see, this life presents itself in a duality simply because, whether we like it or not, as self-aware beings, we experience in the moment a phenomena of the biology, of the objectivity. Like, touch your body right now, you see it's like a physical phenomena, it's something that's here, you know? And then you begin to wonder about what this body means to you, and the idea that is wondering about that, it has automatically, it's like a subjective activity. That means I could sit down here, like, think about this, guys. Like, imagine you sit, like, you go to bed every night, but every night before you go to bed, there's a different thought lingering before you, in some sense, fade into, like, sleep. So what I'm saying is that you can be in the same place, but in you, behind your eyes, you could have different values of what location means. And so this suggests that there is an inner mover, and this inner mover is just what we call life. What else can we call it? You know? So this sort of, I even consider it to be primordial, because it is prior to your ability to conceive. So when you reach an edge of your personality, you find your endless presence, as if your personality was like you walked and suddenly you met an ocean. Like you were right there in front of an ocean, and you saw the vastness of the next phases of movement. For me, I don't consider any person, believe it or not, deep down, like, I don't consider a personality to people. You know, I feel the personalities. If you don't do anything, life reveals itself. You know, one thing I realized when I was younger, and it also kept an ego in me. So what I mean by that is that sometimes in life, especially when you're younger, you're gonna get a thought of yourself, and you're going to get a thought of yourself that is better than this current way you see yourself. Do you see? And so that's going to motivate you to constantly seek an image. We are creatures being, in some sense, sculpted by our experiences. And what that means is that as we experience the day, the image of what we consider the world shifts. As if, like, a child could go the same bus path every day, but every day he notices something different about that same location. Do you see? And so I'm saying that's how the moment comes across. Your presence is non-local. Do you know how mind-blowing what I'm saying is? It's so mind-blowing. It means, like, it's not what I'm saying. Like, there's an experience that cannot be put in language. We can't even talk about it, because the moment we do, we spark the story of individuals, the story of individualism. Let me tell you, a person can only appreciate philosophy if they are curious and, in some sense, they feel an honor to look upon history. What that means is, what philosophy is just like everything that we call knowledge is just creatures on a planet doing stuff. And they're doing stuff based on unique inspirations or unique considerations. That means what led Einstein to, like, being in that post office and suddenly having that thought experiment of moving in a light beam or something, this sort of daydream, like this dude suddenly noticed something so profound. And when we wonder how that process occurred, it could have been one where, as if there was just randomity, as if Einstein didn't even care about who he was to the world. He was just wondering about the science, as if the questions of material existence were so profound that he sought every tool he could find. And for me, science is an art, but many scientists don't understand this. And what I mean by that, it's an art, is because it requires creative maintenance of very firm conclusions made upon the world by certain people who dabbled with physical reality. For me, when I understood resistance is self-induced in some degree, that means, like, you don't have control of, like, suffering, okay? Like, there's gonna be, like, good moments in life and bad moments. Like, that seems real, you know. And so in those bad moments, you're gonna feel suffering, and that means not only an inner idea of you is in some sense crumbling, your physical body also experiences pain, you know. And you got to be very careful in what you consider yourself as, because that is the easiest way to deceive. You fall into the promotion of an emotion, you fall into the shape of an idea. And so for me, if a person comes and says, I believe this, da 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 da, I'll tell that person, for someone to say I believe something in a changing world, it's as if it fascinates me. It's like, what do you believe? Like, what is the value in being on this planet is to know what tool to use, what reality to enter. And that was called mindfulness in Buddhism. And mindfulness only arose when you were no longer doubting yourself. Doubt arises because an image of your incapability is more vivid than the image of your ability. Okay? Anyways, now the sophistication of language, as some scholars of language have suggested, it's as if a child is born and it takes a little bit of data, but there is, like, some animated force behind its materialistic existence, as if this biology is so unique, as if, like, believe it or not, I sometimes look at human beings and I feel we're not from this world. because our behaviors are ones that can, how can I tell you, as if somebody asks the scriptwriter why he wrote the script that way. And the scriptwriter will simply say, because I could. Do you see? A lot of things in this life can be appreciated as an idea, yet at the same time, they shouldn't be treated like if you acknowledge the reality and try to make that a meaning, it will, in some sense, horrify you. You get horrified when you experience failed responsibility. When you feel your free will is going to be denied its comfort. That usually evokes the animal in a lot of people. For me, I find the same attitude that one can say back in imagine you're a sort of the daughter or the son of a king back in the day, in any culture you can visualize. And you in some sense leave this kingdom of the ultimate luxury, and you enter a world that you have not entered before. And you enter a world where people can get sick, people in some sense transition, they die. And people, age and realities change. And in some sense, if you've ever heard this statement where they say everybody is fighting a battle you can't see, you'll suddenly understand why peace is necessary. Because many people on this planet have an inner burden that the outer world doesn't see. And it is the burden of being themselves every day. And for me, the only way to truly walk in the shoes of wisdom is in some sense to find the effortless intelligence. The effortless intelligence doesn't mean, in some sense, not to be productive physically. Your effortless intelligence can arise when, let's say, you've gone really like maximum level of work mode. Like you're like that master who isn't a master yet, but is just endlessly grinding, endlessly trying to attain a certain vision. Just like a sculptor sees, like Michelangelo has this quote, he says, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. And so what language is in some sense, we are trying to set free an inner vision, an inner reality, some concept that can be put into language and has arose, in consciousness. Just like we sculpt an angel out of rock, we share inner realities with the outer through language. And so in some sense, language has to do with the eyes of existence, because fundamentally you're a moment of attention. Like before any conclusion, that's one thing that we know. That in the waking state, by the nature of what's here, we seem to be that here. We seem to be the location of our attention. So if you feel, like let's say you entertain, for me also, like, dear listeners, I'll tell you this, I consider beliefs and just a lot of culture, a lot of the world, I consider it as a program. Anytime I see something repeat, I consider it a program. Sogyal Rinpoche, this Tibetan Buddhist teacher, he says, like this is his quote, he says, there's a famous saying. So just like as I'm relaying his quote, he's also relaying some other quote. So the quote is, there's a famous saying, if the mind is not contrived it is spontaneously blissful, just as water, when not agitated, is by nature transparent and clear. And that's what I meant, guys, by effortless. Because you don't understand. Sometimes the reason you feel you're unlucky or there's resistance is because you're getting in your own way due to a reaction to the fear of an outcome. What that means is, I'll give you an example. Let's say there's two friends, and one friend is having like a gathering or something and invites the other friend, and the other friend suddenly in that moment has to wonder about the future to clarify if he can go to the party or not. Do you see? So, what I'm saying is that words have a direction in time, and their direction is based on the characters, like the individualized characters' vision of the world. So, let me tell you this, there's two ways of knowing the moment. Either you study yourself and you realize how it is interconnected with the world, or either you study the world and you see how it has a relationship to the self. So, regardless of whether you study the world or you study the self, you will come to the presence of attention. Because believe it or not, your mind is attention. Many people don't realize it. This is why in ancient mysticism they saw more than the mind and the body. They saw the mind to be the bridge, as if like a soul remembers itself through the mirror that is the. It's as if like a soul is looking in a mirror, and the mirror is objective reality, and the reflection is the mind. Yet it is all one vision of the eyes of existence. As if, imagine right now, in the subtitle I said the eyes of existence. Imagine right now for like 2 seconds, all manifest phenomena in existence, just like a blink, just turned off for a second. It didn't exist and suddenly came into existence. And then we wonder what would our like memory be and experience be. It would be as if, how can I tell you? Or let me say, how can, like Christ has a quote, or there's a passage in the Bible that says something like to be in the world and not of it. That's a very profound wisdom from Christianity. That you are in this world. You're living here on this rock in the middle of nowhere. And due to just the movement of nature forward, as if sometimes I have to like, I think many people should not be afraid of the idea of death. Because let me tell you why. It's as if, imagine, and whenever your end comes, that is as if like you just appreciate the ride, and then you just watch. And then you'll eventually come down to how deeply as a being, or not how deeply, I don't want to make this like some enlightenment thing, like you just have to have the right attention to your moment, as if your moment is like a Rubik's cube right now, like your moment of intelligence is like a Rubik's cube, and in your authentic, honest self inquiry, like it doesn't have to do with anyone. Like you're studying your own intelligence. Nobody can give you a shit, give an opinion on it. So it's like your own temple that you're in that nobody sees. That's like the ability of the mind. Now the mind usually is directed outward, but if the mind is directed inward, what that means is if your attention watches objectivity and also watches thoughts come and go, it will eventually recognize it is watching the dynamism of the dynamism of manifestation from a static point. So you're going to realize your soul is stillness. Your soul for your mind is silence. And in some sense, the soul of your soul, in some mystical traditions, I think they were like trying to out like show off to one another. Like one tradition was like, "Yo, we will honor the soul of the soul," and some other dude was like, "No, man, we honor the soul of the soul of the soul." And so it had this infinite kind of regression, this infinite expansion of a soul to the person, to the planet, to the solar system, to the galaxy, and and it goes on beyond conception. For me, I feel we are still in a dark room, and to it's one of those things where every candle that's kind of being lit in this dark room is not enough to illuminate all of it. So, in some sense, as if there's a dimension we cannot enter, and this dimension is, in some sense, preserved by an inner what's the word? An inner constriction, and it's an inner. There's an inner like your subconscious is denying the validity of certain phenomena. And the reason it is doing that is because you have, in some sense, found yourself in an egoic vehicle, in an egoic construct that still requires to play the normal game. Something perhaps some artists wanted to shout out to those who could not see art was that in this world, novelty is God. That means something every artist ever existent, every person you can say has, is that they have lived, they have been in existence in a way no other creature has. So pretty much the question comes to a situation where we're saying, okay, so first we were a creature that wasn't speaking and communicating. Now we're a creature that's speaking and communicating. Now what's the next thing beyond this? What's the next evolutionary leap of mankind? And I think the next evolutionary leap is to recognize that beyond the veil of thought, the norm moves without any preconceived um, limits. There's a quote from William Blake. Evidently, he says, "He who binds to himself a joy, does the winged life destroy? He who kisses the joy as it flies, lives in eternity's sunrise." He who binds to himself a joy, so somebody who accepts a paradise. And then he says, "Does the winged life destroy?" And then suddenly sees that paradise is an illusion. But he says, "He who kisses the joy as it flies," so the person who experiences the moment as it comes, lives in eternity's sunrise. Wow, I have a newfound respect for William Blake. Because that's true. So what that means is, right now, I need to drink some water. Excuse my lack of professionalism in this episode. I just want to give a comment because that was a very supernova level kind of a quote.